The religious themes of Hanukkah and Christmas are quite different, but both holidays come in the heart of the winter, at really the darkest hour of the year. And my next guest says that's not really a coincidence. Joining me now is Dr. Paul Shrell-Fox. He is a rabbi at the Schechter Institute. Thank you so much for joining me.
Pleasure to be here.
So tell me a little bit about your theory about why these holidays come really in the winter.
Well, I think we have to start before 2,500 years ago. We have to go back 3,000, 5,000, 10,000 years ago and think about what it is to exist in the dark when we don't have things to light it up other than the sky and the moon and the stars. And when you're going around in the dark, it's really, really scary. And if you have nothing else to make light and you're just beginning to get this idea of fire, it seems that way back then, 10,000 years ago, that's when people started to develop these rituals that surrounded fire, and specifically at the time where the light is getting shorter and shorter, the night is getting longer and longer. There's a midrash that talks about the first man, that when he was created, the Adam Harishon, he didn't know that this is what was going to happen. And so what he did was he brought a sacrifice because he thought maybe what I did was something horrible, and if I bring a sacrifice to God, then God will make the day come back. And sure enough, that's what happened. Of course, then the midrash continues. Then he realized that this is what happens every year, and then that's where we sort of get the idea that sometimes a holiday was created for our God, and sometimes a holiday was created for other gods, for other, let's say, pagan gods.
Right, so a pagan influence here, you see.
Right, I think it's a pagan or non-religious, non-specifically religious influence that anybody that came before, let's say, 2,000, 5,000 years ago, was what we would call pagans today.
Right, so the theme of light, certainly during Hanukkah, is quite obvious.
Right.
Right, we're lighting this candelabra to celebrate the miracle of, both the victory over the Greeks and also just that the oil itself lasted 8 days as we rededicated the temple. But tell me what you think the light kind of influence is in Christmas.
Well, it's
because the Christmas tree is relatively recent.
Right. Well, it's hard for us to really see that. I mean, again, the Christmas tree is relatively recent, but all the lights that go on in the holidays have been going on for a lot longer than what we see. We certainly know that in the United States, if we look at it today, right, every time you turn a corner in the United States, anytime after Thanksgiving, the end of November until, maybe even sometimes in before, until after Christmas, you see people lighting up their houses and lighting up their dark streets. The Christmas tree came, we're not exactly sure when it started, but there were certainly holidays of lights that were going on at the time that the rabbis were developing the rituals that we do today. And it seems that a lot of them had to do with lights, and it seems that the Christian Jews or the Judeo-Christians at the time were also doing things that had to do with lights. When they decided to make it this big green oak tree or evergreen was when they had evergreens at their beck and call, which is more when they got to Europe, which was a long time after that.
Right, and there's also other holidays, Kwanzaa.
And there's Kwanzaa, which certainly is a much newer holiday, and it again borrows the same types of themes with lights, with candelabra and things like that. And there's even recently, the first time it was celebrated was 2001, is this secular holiday or humanist holiday called Human Light. It is celebrated, coincidentally or not, on December 23rd, and there they also do a holiday surrounding lights. Right? It's funny to think about a secular holiday, but that's what they do. And they say, we also need to have a reason to celebrate, and we want to celebrate with everybody else, and so we'll make a holiday that's surrounding that issue of lights.
Right. Now, the issue of light over Hanukkah is, of course, connected to a miracle.
Right.
And I find Hanukkah so interesting because, Jewish culture isn't really so much about miracles.
Right.
But this is one of the times of year when we do talk about miracles.
Right.
So let's dive a little deeper into some of the miracles that we talk about on this holiday.
Right. Well, there are really two versions of what those miracles are. One is that, as it's told to us in the Talmud of Bavli, in the Babylonian Talmud, that when the Maccabees came in and they found that the temple was destroyed and was made impure, they came in, they rebuilt the candelabra, and they lit a candle. They found one cruse of oil, and that lasted for 8 days. Of course, it could have lasted for 1 day, so the miracle was maybe 7 days. But when you look at the historical records that have to do around that, and even in some of the records that the rabbis write in, let's say, the Al Hanisim prayer, that miracle isn't really mentioned. The miracle of the cruse oil that lasts for 8 days. In there, they're talking about a military victory. Now,
Right.
some people would say a military victory
Was a miracle.
Was a miracle, and,
Right.
and in fact, there are certain prayers around Chanukah, around Purim, and recently around Yom Ha'atzmaut of the same type of theory of fewer soldiers were able to overcome greater soldiers. One way or the other, we're talking about some type of divine intervention, according to the rabbis.
Right, that helped the Maccabees actually win
Right.
and kick out the Greeks.
Right, and interestingly, as the Maccabees say in the Book of Maccabees, they don't mention the oil. Now, it's not quite sure when the Book of Maccabees was written and who wrote it. But certainly they were closer to time of that miracle at the temple than the rabbis were in the Second Temple period.
It's interesting. I wonder why, and this happens all the time in Jewish culture, where something is written, but in the end, something else is emphasized.
Right, well, I think,
and it's interesting how in this case, it moved further and further away from war.
Right.
And military victories to this idea of oil lasting.
Right. What I think happened is that the rabbis were very geopolitically minded, and they said, "Look, we have now the Romans who are out there, we have the Greeks who are out there, and if we start saying how great we were at war."
Right, we don't want to be rebel rousers.
Right, we don't want to be, in the end, they ended up to be rebel rousers at the end with Bar Kokhba, but at the time they said, let's see if we can play it down. Let's really say that it's really about this miracle of the cruise of oil, and say that the war was a minor thing, and we'll put it on the side. We'll keep it in our prayers, because sometimes the people who come to listen to our prayers will leave earlier. But let's play that down and play up something else that's more of a divine intervention rather than a type of military victory.
Thank you so much for joining us, Paul Shrell-Fox from the Schechter Institute. We're going to take a quick break, but don't go anywhere. We have so much more coming up for you on this special edition of the Holy Land Uncovered. We're coming to you from Jerusalem, from the Rockefeller Archaeological Museum. Stay with us.